different countries have a couple of beers and discuss a stadium somewhere in the world and their experiences there. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And we are excited to be here with you tonight. Before we get started, please make sure to subscribe to the Stadium Journey YouTube page. Like the video, leave some comments, or just one. We won't be greedy. The official Stadium Journey review of today's venue can be found at stadiumjourney.com, or the link can be found in the comments below. So let's get rolling. Dave, what are you drinking today?
So today I have one that is, well, it's a remnant actually. So went to see the Welland Jackfish, and I don't often drink at the ballpark. I figure, I could probably go to 2 more games for the price of 2 beers.
Especially, I was at Yankee Stadium. They have their own beer. We'll talk about it on the other podcast. $15 for one of their special beers.
Oh, ouch. Well, this one wasn't too bad. I think it was 8. Anyway, so I have it's a special brew just for the team. It is a Welland Jackfish Pond Water Lager, and easily the most popular brew at the park. It's done by a local brewery, Newark Brewing Company. Local, not Newark, New Jersey. It's from in a little town called Virgil, Ontario, and I saw it was branded for the team, and I had to give it a shot. So that's what I got today.
Nice. I am following in your footsteps here with a special team branded beer. That seems to be the new trend here in 2021. So on my recent visit to Kannapolis, North Carolina, we were at Atrium Health Ballpark, and I stopped and got a baller beer. This is brewed by Cabarrus Brewing Company in Concord, New Hampshire, which is right near Kannapolis. And again, this is a very popular beer, just like you said, and very nice. Nice taste. Excuse me, went down the wrong way though. And the picture that I sent to you has the can of the baller beer and an ear of roasted corn that you can only get at the ballpark. So fine combination there in the city of Kannapolis, North Carolina, if you happen to be in town for a Cannonballers game. So if we were visiting today's destination, we might be drinking a Blonde Fatale from Peachtree Brewing, because today we are going to talk about Principal Park, home of the Iowa Cubs. Before we dive in, let's take a look at Stadium Vitals. Okay, so in a lot of past episodes of Obstructed Views, we've talked about some AAA ballparks that are nice and shiny and brand new and have all the modern bells and whistles. Today, we're talking about a ballpark that is actually now technically the 3rd oldest ballpark in AAA. By our standards, I would say it's really the 2nd oldest. Doesn't have a lot of the newfangled amenities like some of the new parks. But how does it hold up when you compare Principal Park to some of these other new ballparks?
Well, I would say like the oldest ballpark in AAA we just talked about on Obstructed Views is Salem Field in Buffalo, and that was an 88 vintage 1988. Principal Park vintage 1992, so it's not too much older. Of course, the one in between there is in Moosic, Pennsylvania, home of the Scranton Wilkes-Barre. Man, did I kill that! Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders, but they had such a massive overhaul that it's pretty much a brand new ballpark, right?
Right. I would agree with you there.
I think, Principal Park, I didn't think of this at the time, but in prepping for this, I looked at it and I went, wow, it looks a lot like Buffalo. Smaller, where Buffalo is like a 16,000, Iowa is a 11.5. It looks a lot like Rochester, very, very similar. Some of the seats are covered. You just have that kind of feel. Now, I think one of the advantages is you have a long-standing team. The Iowa Oaks were an affiliate of the White Sox, I believe, in 1969, and basically basically the Iowa team has been with either the White Sox or the Cubs for the full duration. So you have, I would say, a strong affiliation. Des Moines, not exactly around the corner from Chicago, but if they can sort of claim that as their territory, and you have maybe a bigger minor league city, so they do well enough with the capacity, with the attendance, that you don't need to wow people with the over the top bells and whistles and all those kinds of things. Nothing. To be honest, nothing really blows me away about Principal Park, but I like it. It's just a nice park. And if you think, and I'm sure we'll head in this direction, if you think of Iowa, don't you really think of, like, you think of baseball and you think of simplicity, right? Don't those seem to go hand in hand? I don't know.
That's
That's kind
true.
of what I think.
Yeah. I mean, a fancy $150 million ballpark would really seem out of place. And although Des Moines is a really nice city, we'll get into that a little later. But I think your overall point is a correct one. Yeah. Although as local fans not needing all the bells and whistles, folks here in Rhode Island may disagree with you a little bit there, Dave. Yeah, and I know a big selling point, before I went to Iowa for Des Moines to see the Cubs the first time, our correspondent, James Hilchin, works for the team. We've had him on the other podcast.
Yep.
And he said, wait till you see the view. And yeah, you've got a fantastic view of the Iowa State House, but it is kind of way out there.
It is.
So it's not
way
like
out there,
it's not hovering right over the fence like the skyscrapers in Charlotte are hovering right over the outfield fence. It's out there. It's nice, and they light it up at night, and it is a nice backdrop, but it's in the distance.
Yeah, it's and it's got a really unique look to it too, doesn't it? It's got like that golden dome right at the top. It's got almost that Notre Dame kind of feel to it. But you're right, it is way off in the distance. But I if you want to compare it to Buffalo, the view is definitely there in Iowa versus in Buffalo. The view is better. There's a couple nice little perks. They've got a fountain out there.
Yep, in right field. Yep.
Right field. Yeah, the kids like that. I know my son liked sloshing around there when he was probably not overly prepared to be dressed like that, but he had that. Sight lines are great. You have a lot of seating options. You've got your kind of decks with your like your umbrellas, a picnic table kind of seating. You got covered seating. You got some seating that's out in the sun. You got all of those different kinds of things. Maybe not the kind of high end kind of seating that you would see in a major league park, but all the different seating options are there in Iowa, in Des Moines specifically, I would say.
Yeah, definitely a product of its era, built before the fad of the concourse, the open concourse where you can watch the action from the concourse. The concourse at Principal Park is located underneath the grandstand. You do have the restaurant out in left field, which is a nice place to catch part of the game if you're getting a drink or an hors d'oeuvre or something like that, a little ballpark food perhaps. It runs pretty much from the foul line out to straightaway left field, I would believe. Good place. We actually sat out there for a minute and caught a little bit of the game. Iowa is one of the 3 ballparks where I've thrown the first pitch. A little bit of trivia there.
I'm still waiting for that one.
And yeah, it definitely looks like it's not an 80s park, but it looks like that late 80s, early 90s style, like Buffalo, as you mentioned. Great craft beer scene there. We were talking about some ballpark specific beers at the top of the show. They've got this, I don't know what you would call it, but this giant beer stand it's got to have like at least 50 kegs out there on it, 50 different taps, where you can get all kinds of different local craft beers. Or if your taste run towards a Bud Light, I'm sure you can get that there too.
That's too bad. I think the other thing is this is, I'm not sure if they would have felt a difference. And in the purge and shuffle that was minor league baseball, Iowa was one of the teams that sort of got shuffled around slightly. In that, they were part of that old American Association League. Buffalo was part of that, and I think the Tennessee teams were as well. And then when that league died, and all those teams kind of went either east or west, Iowa ended up going west,
Right.
which I'm not sure was to their benefit. I don't think it really fit. So when
they were nice enough to host one of our get-togethers in, I think, 2019, and they did mention a couple times that they kind of took one for the greater good by shuffling out west. So your point is spot on right there.
Well, and now they are back east, right? So
they did. Major League Baseball did them a solid in return. Yeah.
Yeah, and there were I want to say four. There were at least four teams that went from east to west, and Omaha being one, and the two Tennessee teams as well.
Right.
And if you are okay with a little bit more unbalanced, with AAA East being really a whole lot bigger than West.
Well, it's 20 and 10, yes.
Then that works for you. I'm curious if that has been felt in the ballpark at all or not. If there is a stronger following because they've moved east. Unfortunately, now the schedules don't seem to offer anything new for them. Maybe a few games, but it seems like the minor league schedules are very, very geographic centric.
And the regional, they've gone to the hockey model, where this year, at least for the pandemic, they were just playing teams in their division. The schedules for 2022 have come out, and while it's expanded a little bit, I can't speak for who Iowa's playing, but I know like the Worcester Red Sox are playing the teams in their division, plus only a couple of the Midwestern teams. Yeah. So it's not like the old days where we would see every team in the league come to town at least once. So they are going to a more regional-based schedule.
Yeah. So, I mean, if anything, that gives you a real sense of the strength of this center as a market, right? Like, they're probably one of the most solid AAA markets that there has been. I mean, the affiliation they've had with the Cubs is since 1981. It's probably one of the longest tenured associations that any AAA team has had. I mean, the only ones that kind of come close off the top of my head, I would think that Toledo wouldn't be too far off in their affiliation with Detroit. But, other than that, it seems like there's been a bit of a bouncing around for just about everywhere else. So, it's a strong affiliation for them. And I think that translates for them as well. The exterior of the ballpark is probably where it differs most from like a Rochester or a Buffalo, in that it's a little bit more bricked, light brick, not red brick, green seats, but it's a light brick. One thing that I think is maybe a little bit unfortunate is that when they sold the naming rights for Principal Park, it's almost like one of the great stadium names has sort of fallen off. And the old Iowa Stadium was Sec Taylor Stadium, Sec Taylor being a sports writer, a prominent sports writer in Iowa. Now, when they built the new stadium, it was also Sec Taylor Stadium. When they sold the naming rights, they did shuffle to name the field Sec Taylor Field. But you know how that goes, right? For better or worse, people will pick something and they'll stick with it. And it seems like, that Sec Taylor name is almost lost. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate thing. That was something that I actually had to look up and actually ask James, who was kind enough to give us a tour of the press box when we were there. So yeah, I think that's unfortunate. And we've talked before about how when stadium names sort of fall off and go all corporate, it's not the worst corporate name out there, and it has stuck around for a while. I think one other thing, maybe it's a little goofy, but I like it anyway. The address for Principal Park, one line drive.
Yeah, yeah. And you were talking a little bit about the city of Des Moines, and it really is, people may not realize this. It was, I forget who did this survey, but they named Des Moines as the top minor league city in the nation. And so that's combining, obviously the Cubs and the AHL hockey team, who are now the Wild. And they've also had their share of indoor football teams, the Iowa Barnstormers.
Barnstormers, yep.
I don't even know if the Barnstormers still exist, but the name is legendary.
I think they exist in a smaller indoor football league.
The IFL or something.
One of the best G League cities, yep. I guess, in Des Moines. And for Raptors fans, Nick Nurse was kind of a driving force behind getting a team in Iowa, and he was the first coach there, and that was one of his steps on his way up the ladder to eventually becoming an NBA coach.
Yep, and in addition to all that, they are a strong city for USHL junior hockey. So a lot of great minor league things to do. And if you're visiting Des Moines, don't sleep on the local food scene. I can tell you from experience, I've had the privilege of visiting Principal Park twice and explored the city a little bit. And thanks to Adam Richmond and the crew over at Man vs. Food. But man, he did not steer me wrong. All the places I've eaten in Des Moines have been outstanding, and a couple of them have been within walking distance of the ballpark. One of them was High Life Lounge, which is, I think, less than a block away from the ballpark. And if you go there, they're known for like their jalapeno tater tots and something they call braised chicken. It's not fried chicken, it's not baked, it's something in the middle, but it's delicious. And when you go into the High Life Lounge, it's exactly what you might expect. It's decorated like a 70s lounge in the High Life style. It's got the wood paneling, it's got the carpeting. It's like stepping back in time a little bit.
I would say that for us, our trip to Des Moines was a bit of a stop, so we didn't do a lot of exploring. I do recall that I did do a little bit of research, and I had to make sure that when I did eat one of those pork tenderloins, very similar to what we would see in like Indianapolis. But maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but I don't think we can talk too much about the Iowa Cubs or Des Moines without mentioning Field of Dreams, and that was a stop for us. I mean, it's not around the corner.
Yeah,
it's about a 3-hour drive from ballpark to ballpark, about 180 miles. But depending on where you're coming from, like if you look at the map, if you're coming from like Madison, Wisconsin area, it's not out of the way at all. Now we were coming from Minnesota, so it was a bit of an out of the way. But really, I mean, Field of Dreams, and we've talked about it before on the other podcast. Really a great tourist spot if you are a baseball fan. There's just a whole different feeling there. And what I was talking about earlier with just simplicity, right? It's just, the ballpark. And if you go at the right time, you go late in the season in August or something like that, so that the corn is high.
Right.
And just an exceptional kind of spot to hit in Dyersville, Iowa. James was instrumental on really making sure that we went, because I wasn't positive that this was going to be something that we were going to do. But he insisted that we would not be disappointed, and we weren't. We really had a good time, and perfect timing. I think my wife actually watched it in the car on the way there. We were lucky that when we went, there was a guy who was an extra in the movie. He was there dressed up in full regalia and throwing batting practice. And if you are really hardcore and you really want to plan it, you can plan for one of those days where some of the extras and old timers get together and play a game.
Yep. And if you are doing an Iowa trip, even though Iowa did lose a couple of teams, minor affiliated teams, in the reshuffling and the restructuring, there are still teams to be found all across the state. We did what you were talking about, Dave, when we hit Field of Dreams. We went from Des Moines to Field of Dreams over to Quad Cities on the other side of the state. So, and Des Moines is actually kind of centrally located. If you're going to Minneapolis afterwards or going down to Kansas City, a little bit of a hike, but it's doable.
And if you can work it out, it's not quite the seasons don't quite match up, but you know, that's a seriously underrated college football area in Iowa there, whether you're going to Iowa or whether you're going to Iowa State. I mean, it's big time in both of those spots.
Yeah, and Drake University is right there in Des Moines, not too far from the ballpark. I'll steer it right back to food again because when one of our trips, we went to a place called Jethro's Barbecue, which is right on the Drake campus. They have a sandwich there called the Adam Emenecker sandwich, named after the player who brought Drake to the final 16, I think the Sweet 16 one year. So they named a giant sandwich after him. Did not try it, but one thing I did try that you got to try if you go to Des Moines is Fong's Pizza, where they have fused pizza and Chinese food.
Wow.
And yeah, you wouldn't think those two things go together, but I had a General Tso pizza, and it was as outstanding as you might imagine. And again, within walking distance of the ballpark. And there are many more places to check out right downtown Des Moines. So yeah, it could be a whole trip.
Yeah, definitely a place that I want to that I would like to get back and actually spend maybe a little bit more time there. But it seems to be a great place to go on the way to other places too, right? If you're going west, you know, you just keep on going. You're in Omaha. If you're going south, keep on going. You're in Kansas City. That's where we were going. We were going Kansas City. You know, so unfortunately, I think too often it's the stop in between, and that's what it was for us.
Right.
But a memorable trip.
Yeah, we talk about cities a lot of times that we wish we had spent more time in. And if you get a little taste of Des Moines, you're actually going to want to stay a little longer. And like you said, for us, it was a stopover to the College World Series one year. It was a stopover on our way to Minnesota one time. It was a stopover back on the way to Field of Dreams, but definitely worth checking out. And even though it might be a little older than some of the AAA ballparks out there, definitely worth a visit. Principal Park, Des Moines, Iowa, home of the Iowa Cubs, a worthy stadium journey. Hope to see you on the road real soon. Check out our website, stadiumjourney.com. Cheers.
Cheers.